Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. So welcome to another episode of my weekly meditations. And today I just wanted to share with you guys a very common topic that I've been asked a lot, and also I see a lot of YouTube videos or a lot of things have been said about this topic. And I just wanted to bring you guys provocative thoughts so that you can just go into the internet. I encourage you to go to the internet and search for these topics, for the things I'm going to tell you now. Search for the evidence. Search for the truth. Don't believe something just because it's in the textbooks or because it's taught by everyone. Always go to the evidence, always go to the source and try to see for yourself. Okay, is this really true? Is this really how they say it, or there's something more? Don't believe, even myself, don't believe me just because I'm saying it. Always go and always try to see the truth and to search for the truth. Now today, the topic is going to be evolution. I will probably be splitting this video into two parts. So the next part will be out next week. And today I'm going to just introduce you to this argument, to this topic, all right? Because I think that, you see, this is a very common topic, as I said before, but the people don't really think about it as they should. Because you see, if God doesn't exist, you see, we have to account and we have to find explanations on how our reality came up, right? If we today, right, if we see so many different animals, so many different species, we find ourselves, human beings, all these things we can see today, right? And if God doesn't exist, so if there is no creation, right, as the Bible teaches, if that is false, let's assume that is false, then how can we explain our reality? And the scientists and most of the atheists or agnostic scientists, the explanation they give is evolution. So they say that evolution actually accounts for all the life that we see today, and we just accept it, right? If you have been to school, maybe you're still in school, university, as you grew up, you just assume that evolution is true, right? Because you've always been taught it like that. You have never questioned it. You have never asked yourself anything about that. You just assume that it's true. Because if God doesn't exist, evolution is the only answer, right, to our reality. And now today, I just want to give you some provocative thoughts so that you can start questioning this. You can start learning more about evolution, and you can start really seeing for yourself if evolution can actually account for all of the life that we see today on our planet. And now, first of all, let's bring down some definitions, because I think that there is a lot of confusion going on, and especially I've seen some college professors, when some students were asked and were questioning evolution, they were just answering very, very vaguely, and they were trying to mock the student, or many times they were answering the question but using a different definition of evolution. So let's just be clear first on that aspect. First of all, there are three main definitions of evolution. The first one is the one that everyone agrees with. That is this: evolution simply means change over time. So, for example, let's take our own bodies, right? We're born, we are babies, we're small. Through time, our body evolves. We become larger, heavier, we start talking, our brain develops, we become, kids, then teenagers, then adults, our body changes, then we become old. And all these processes, all this change over time, we could call it evolution, right? Because we are changing over time. And we know that things change over time. Things don't stay the way they are. Even inanimate objects like rocks or anything, they change over time because of environmental factors. For example, the sea that is eroding the stones every time, so it's crashing against the stones and is making them smaller and smaller. That's a change over time. So we could call it evolution. And you see, this definition of evolution, no one denies it, and it's just so clear, and there is so much evidence, and it's so intuitive that no one questions it. So, you see, I have no problem with this definition of evolution. I think that that's actually true, and this happens. The second definition of evolution is what's called a microevolution, or what's called the genetics evolution. So mutations. Our DNA, unfortunately, actually the DNA of all living beings, unfortunately goes through change. So exactly as everything changes over time, also our DNA changes. But it changes because of the fact that our body decides to express more or less certain parts of the DNA. It changes because of mutations. So it changes because of external factors, for example, sun rays, or just mutations where our DNA it's duplicating can occur. Our body is not efficient at 100%. Our proteins can make mistakes, and these are the mutations that can occur. There are also some problems, for example, with oxidation, with oxygen can also make mutations into our body, our DNA. There are external factors, like I said before, sun rays, radioactivity. Many different things can cause mutation into our DNA. And for example, a very quick way to give evidence for this is our own life. The fact that we grow older over time is exactly the reason that our DNA accumulates, unfortunately, over time mutations. It becomes worse, and that's how and that's why we age. And that's why the more we get older, the more likely we're gonna get a genetic disease of any kind. That's why at a certain point our body just can't function anymore properly and we die. That's a very simple example of this process. And this is actually that, once again, there is so much evidence for this. Scientists have studied genetics and they have seen that these mutations actually occur like this. And another example could be how our skin can grow darker if we expose ourselves to the sun. Our melanin receptors, they sense the exposure to the sun and they try to protect our body from the sun rays through more production of melanin that makes our skin grow darker. And that's why the skin grows darker when you go into the sun. If you are not used to being into the sun, your skin actually becomes irritated, and that's why you become sunburned. So sunburned is when you expose yourself, is where your body ability to adapt to the sun is not as fast as the damage that the sun is causing. So you can create enough melanin fast enough, and therefore you become sunburned. So that's just another example of this process. And once again, I have no problem with this definition of evolution, and that's something that actually occurs. The third definition of evolution, also called macroevolution, this is the main problem that I think exists within evolution. And this is unfortunately the evolution that is taught in schools, in science books, and is the evolution that is considered to be the one account that we consider the cause for all the life in our earth. And the definition of this evolution is like this, that these small changes that we find before, so mutations, environment, adaptation, survival, natural selection, of course, what happens is that all these changes, also all these mutations into our DNA, over very long periods of time, can actually adapt, right? And can actually create a new function. So an organism through time and through all these mutation and natural selection processes can actually acquire new functions and can become eventually, after again a lot of time, can become a new species or can become something new. And this is the evolution that is taught in schools, right? If God, as I said before, if God doesn't exist, then we have to answer our reality. And that's the answer that scientists have, evolution. So at the beginning, there were some very simple organisms on the water. And again, through these very small changes into the DNA, over time, they acquired new functions. They became more complex. They integrated with different parts of DNA. The DNA just grow more and more complex. And eventually they became the first unicellular organisms, for example, like viruses. Then they become even more complex, like bacteria. And eventually they become so much more, right, that eventually you find the first living beings on the sea, for example, planktons, right, that are the first, like, the most simple but still pretty complex living being on the sea. And then from there, again, through time, through these mutations, through this function, through this fusion of the DNA, mutations over time, natural selection, environment, and all this, eventually this plankton became something more complex, until we find fishes, then more and more complex, then until we find amphibians that were like pretty much a transition between the fish and the land animals. Then after amphibians, we have reptiles. From reptiles, then we have like birds and mammals. And then from mammals, then we find man. From the apes, then we find man. So this is pretty much summed up the theory of evolution of like living beings on this planet. And I'm gonna just give you now why I think this is not a good answer to all the things that we can find today. So all the biodiversity, all the different species of animals, even ourselves, why evolution cannot account through all this. Let's go back to the definition. For the macroevolution definition is that these very small changes, mutations, fusion of the DNA, infections of other organisms, and natural selection, and a lot of time can actually create a new function. Unfortunately, all the research that has been done in this last, 100 years, probably a little bit less, in the laboratory has proved that mutations never create something new. Mutations, when they act on the DNA, they always change a function, a protein that is already there. So there is a full functional protein, and when a mutation comes to the DNA that encodes for the protein changes, and it's either deleted, so the protein is not there anymore, or the protein is there but doesn't function properly and functions less efficiently, or it functions too much. So these are the three main outcomes of the mutations on proteins. And you can see that there is no new function acquired. The protein originally had already a function, and what the mutation simply did was to delete that function, to reduce it, or to enhance it. There is no new function acquired. Now, at first sight, it might happen that, for example, if the protein is there, right, and you don't have it anymore, then you actually have acquired a new function, you could say, because of the fact that you have something that then you don't have it anymore. And you see, losing something is not forcibly, it's not a negative thing, right? If you, if you lose something that could be harmful for you, then that's better, right? Unfortunately, again, research and what studies on this field and this topic has produced is that even when the protein is deleted, so it's not there at all, still the function that you could be acquiring because of the protein is not there is still less than the function that you lose. So the fact that the protein is not there anymore is more of a loss than the fact that the protein, by not being there anymore, then you can maybe gain something new. And I'm gonna now give you an example, and this is gonna be the end of this first part of the video. And this example has been given as to proof of evolution. Evolution can occur even nowadays. And the proof is that some people that live in countries with malaria, that is a disease that is transmitted through the bites of the mosquitoes. Some people in these countries with epidemics of malaria, so very high rates of infection of malaria, became immune to malaria. So scientists were there, they were studying these people, and they found that they actually have a mutation. They had a mutation on a certain protein that was needed for the protozoa that causes the malaria to the life cycle of this protozoa. And because this protein, because of the mutation, right, wasn't there anymore, the protozoa wasn't able to use the protein to infect the cells, and therefore these people were actually immune, completely immune to malaria. They couldn't get sick in any way. And of course, all the scientists, everyone's saying, wow, this is the proof of evolution. This is something that proves that evolution still occurs today. These people, through natural selection and through evolution, they acquired this new function. Now they are immune to malaria. They can't get sick anymore. And now, what they don't say is that, yes, these people became immune to malaria, but the fact that this protein wasn't there anymore make them also more susceptible to other infections or to other problems. So the fact that they had this protein wasn't working anymore, yes, they were immune to malaria, but at the same time, because they lost this protein, they also had other problems. So you can see the main problem with evolution, if God doesn't exist, and therefore there is nothing that has created us or that has created all the living beings as we find it today. The main problem with evolution is that the mutations, natural selection, and just changes over time cannot account for all the things that we find today. Mutations do not create anything new. They always alter or change something that is present there already. And even if when sometimes these mutations can make us lose something that could make us acquire, for example, being immune to malaria, or sometimes being intolerant, being immune to lactose. I think there was another mutation that they have studied that, like, people that were able to don't get bad anymore when they were drinking lactose or something like that, once again because of these proteins and mutations. Even if when that happens and it looks like it's a positive effect, so this could be an actual evidence that these very small changes can actually over time can make an organism acquire new functions. Unfortunately, yes, you're winning, acquiring something, but at the same time you're losing something. So it's never completely good. It's always maybe a little bit good, but the worse is always greater. And that's the main problem with evolution. So this is the first video, the first part of the video that I wanted to speak to you about today. So as I said before, I encourage you to search for all these things, go into the internet, try to see it for yourself, which is the evidence. If actually evolution, if there are more proofs for evolution, I will be listening to them in the comments, and I will be trying in the next video to answer to some of those comments. And I'm gonna just continue with the second part when I try to go into a little bit more of detail of why evolution shouldn't be considered anymore an answer for how life occurred in our planet and an answer for all the biodiversity that we find today. So God bless you and see ya. Bye bye.